Boy, I tell you, that's a song that gets into my throat, chokes me up. Did you notice that phrase in there? Oh, hear me. Do what you must do. Be careful. Right? God wants us to be servants. And a willing heart asking Him to do what He must do could cause a lot of things to happen in our life, a lot of changes, if you will. Because that's what a servant is. It's a change from what we've been trained by the world to be. Grateful you're here tonight to come and worship God and hear another portion of His Word to provide for us a way of life. No, His way of life. That if we understand God properly, does away with the other way of life. You know, many of us have probably heard of a man named Jerry Rice. Argumentably, one of the best receivers to ever play in the United States or in the National Football League. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but he came from a very small college out of Mississippi Valley State University. And that's very rare. Out of all the schools, he said, Mississippi Valley State was the only one that came to me and made me feel special. So he took their scholarship and went on to a great career as a football wide receiver. And I said that to say this: do we feel special? I mean, that isn't an arrogant question or a question of arrogance. Do we feel special? Because let me tell you, God saw a desire in you to be someone special. Someone special in His eyes. And He saw in that person somebody who had eyes that would see, ears that would hear, and a heart that would be willing to change. Willing to take on this new life as a servant. The song was great. The prayer was great. Opening our minds and our hearts to what it means to be a servant, what it means to desire the idea of being a servant. Because it's not easy. I mean, you know, we're asking God to pour us into the mold of a servant. And, you know, that gets a little warm. Right? Because it's got to be purified. It's got to melt. It's got to be liquidated. The Christian's desire is to be poured into that servant's mold. So tonight I want to get into the book. I want us to understand, out of Numbers chapter 14, a man named Caleb. And look at him. He had a servant's heart. And I want us to see what that means to us and what that means to God. He had that servant. He had a servant spirit. Something inside him was different. He had a servant strategy. Not the one being served strategy, but the one who is serving strategy. And then the greatest of it all is that he had a servant success. And these are important for us because we want to be servants. Because if you don't want to be a servant, then you just made a big mistake singing that song. You said, make me a servant. God said, you ask, you shall receive, right? We are going to allow ourselves to be molded into the structure. Look at the servant's structure. Look at the servant's attitude. How this great servant was made. And Numbers 5. Now we know what's going on. The children of Israel starting to rebel, starting to get ugly with God. And, you know, He takes them up and He promises this great land. And they're starting to get ugly, and really Moses has to intervene and say, guys, you know, let's not get crazy. God, hold off your anger and let's get this right. And so they send up these 12 spies up this mountain. And it's a big mountain, right? To go and spy out the land. 10 of them come back and say, whoa, no, we cannot. We are not able to do this. And the whole idea is the idea of a servant is rebelling against those who rebel against God. And these people are coming back with not a very good report. So Caleb was somebody who stood for God even when it didn't seem right, even when he was outnumbered. Numbers chapter 13, verses 30 through 33, and of course 14, verses 1 through 10, it gives us a great explanation of what they were going through and the troubles that they were facing. And I want to start off this sermon today talking about this love that Caleb had for God. His love for God wouldn't let him not do it. What in our life, everything in our life should be things that God asks us to do, we should want to do them. Everything. All things. And you know what's great about it? Paul tells us in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Caleb knew that. His love wouldn't let him not do it. His faith in God allowed him to overcome the fears that the world had set before him. I want us to go over to Numbers 13. I want us to read verses 30 through 33 to catch this idea. In verse 30, it says, then Caleb quieted. He silenced the people. He made them be quiet before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they're too strong for us. Oh, how many times has God asked us to do something and I'm not able to do that. I don't have the time. You know, the world's too strong for me. I have too much of the world, and it's got too much power in my life to let go of that and do what you asked me to do. Caleb wasn't going to let that happen. That word, that go up, he said, what Caleb said is, we can rise above this task. We can get above it. And you know what's the killer? You know how old Caleb was when this was going on? Roughly 85 years old. 85 years old, and this man wasn't going to let no mountain stop him. He said that God would help them overcome or take them and they can overcome them, right? God completes us. What he's saying is God will complete us for this task. There is nothing that we should fear. We shouldn't be, afraid of who they are, because God is the one who sent us for the task, so he's going to complete us for that task. What a great servant. What a great start to learn what a servant and being a servant truly is. Tonight we're going to look at a servant. Being a servant is important in life, because a servant structure, a way a servant is built, it's going to be different. In verse 24 of Numbers 14, the Bible says, but my servant Caleb. Now, if that's Cub, that's not a big deal. Cub's saying that's my servant. But this isn't Cub saying, this is God saying that. My servant, God saying, my servant Caleb. I pray he says that about Cub, because he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully. You see what a different spirit will do? Do you see the importance of baptism and God pouring his different spirit into us? Because our spirit, it may only go till Sunday morning. And that's just occasionally if it's not interrupting anything else. See, our spirit needs to be let go of, so that different spirit can come in and guide us. Romans 8:14, those who are being led by the Spirit, these are children of God. These are the ones that let God guide them. Different spirit has followed me fully. I will bring into the land which he entered. I will bring into the land, and his descendants shall take the possession of it. Here, I hope we hear this. Hear, O Israel, right? Listen to what God is saying here. If we turn in our Bibles and go over to Psalm chapter 1, and we're going to see the idea of a servant being formed right before our eyes. A different spirit means Caleb had a different spirit. What he's saying is that he was guided along by a different force. It wasn't his own desires that he was trying to fulfill. It wasn't his strength that he was trying to fulfill it with. And it wasn't his enemies he was trying to conquer. It was all about God. God was the main guide of all that. And so when we look at Psalm chapter 1, and we look at verses 1 through 3, how blessed is the man. There's that blessed word. We talked about that this morning. The blessed life. The blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. The blessed man. He's a servant. He lives the blessed life. Nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He'll be like a tree firmly planted by the streams of water, which yields its fruit its season, and its leaf does not wither. And whatever he does, he prospers. He's successful. So we look at what it is that David is writing for us. The idea of God's blessed life is like two cords wrapped together that are tightened by, an outside force trying to pull it apart. This rope is twisted together in such a way that if you try to pull it apart, it only gets tighter. When that world's trying to tug at us in this blessed life, we just cling closer to God. We just hold closer to our faith. And we do not let the life that the world is trying to take us into take us away from this idea. We are blessed in this life. We don't walk in the counsel of the wicked. The wicked to God, and in this word, means people who have left his path. It didn't say they're robbers, they're thieves, they might be good people. They might have some good ideas. They might do some good things, but they have left his path. They're wicked. They're wicked to God because they don't allow him to lead them down the right path. They don't let the people like that give guidance to their steps. They don't walk in that counsel. They're not counseled by those people. They don't stand among sinners. They don't stand in the path of sinners, right? In other words, they are not fortified by the life of a sinner. I'm not counseled by their walk, and my life is not fortified, because to stand, we have to be fortified. And the idea of standing here is in the path of sinners. That's not the fortification of life. But look at this. A servant's delight is in the law of God. Some people's delight is very short-lived. And no, Cub, that's not a short joke. That's a real thing. How deep is your delight for God? Delight's a very deep word. The idea of delight in the law. We find pleasure, not in that God is telling us what to do, but we find pleasure in what the law is accomplishing in us. Oh man, it's hard to explain that, but that's what he's saying. We get that, we're tired of the word telling us what to do. Our bosses tell us what to do. The news tells us. The gas pumps tell us. The grocery store tells us. Everybody's telling us what to do, and God's going, hey, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you how to do it in a way that's pleasing unto me, and you'll have your life blessed. You delight in that law. They're planted. Be like a tree firmly planted by the streams of water. You know what happens we're very unfamiliar with water around here, right? But when there's a lot of water, there's a lot of trees. Because the trees can dig their roots. For you foreign people, roots, right? Way down in the ground. They can go deep in that ground, and when the wind blows, it doesn't knock them down. It keeps them strong. It keeps them planted. Are we planted near the stream? What did Jesus tell the woman at the well? Water of life. You'll never thirst. You're planted in that water. Look what he says. It yields its fruit in the season, and its leaf does not wither. They're nourished by God. They bear fruit. And you know what that word in the Hebrew means? It's decorated. I love that. My life is decorated. You know, we certain time of the year, we go out and decorate trees, and oh, how beautiful we stand in all of them. But God says, you're the tree that I'm decorating. I'm giving that beauty to. I'm surrounding your life with this beauty. And then because we have this great life, the blessedness of it, then we don't grow weary. That's found right there when he says, its leaf does not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers. That leaf, it means that the work of the beginning doesn't flow out of it. Do we see that? The beginning works. When we started, you remember Jesus when he was talking to the churches in Asia said, I remember the works you did at the beginning. Return to those. Go back. Your leaf is withering. Don't let that leaf wither because we're servants. We work because that's what servants do. I don't work to be a servant. I work because I am a servant. Right? The idea of salvation. So we see very clearly that Caleb was of a different nature, of a different person. 14th verse, or 24th verse of 14th chapter. My servant Caleb was built different. My granddaughter always tells me that. I'm built different. Okay. Yeah, we are built different. I've never understood what my granddaughter means, but I understand what God means. We are of a different nature. We are a different structure. We have a whole different idea about us. There was a child one time in school going to a science class, and she made a statement in this class. She said that mushrooms always grow in damp places, which that makes them look like umbrellas. We grow in God's water. That makes us look like servants. You see? We're being molded by God, poured into the mold of a servant. And as this servant starts taking form, God does something inside that definitely affects the outside. As God spoke about Caleb, he said, because he has had a different spirit. Do we see that? Caleb isn't the same as your normal person walking around. It's a spirit that God gives us that is willing to overlook the odds and see victory. Now, there is a misprint here because I caught that and I changed it and I sent it into it. No, that's right. I had Luke 12 and that was wrong. So it's John 12. So it is right. Thank you, Charlie. Charlie's up to date. Cub's not, right? John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. Look at this servant's attitude. The whole idea of being Caleb was guided by a different spot. I want us to go, before we go to John, let's go over to verses 8 and 9 of Numbers 14. Look at this. In verse 8, it says, if the Lord is pleased with us. Now, wait a minute. I thought we were pleasing God. There's your blessed life. If the Lord is pleased with us because I'm pleased in pleasing God, there's the blessed life. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us. That's a gift. That's a gift. God says, it's yours. You trust in me. You follow me. You love me. It's yours. He'll give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Do we see that? I know what the words say, but does it resonate in our lives? Our enemies don't have protection. We do. We're protected by a God that promises life through his word, folks. And if we stand in it, we stand firm in it, we hold fast to it, we are not persuaded to leave it, we are protected. And those people cannot defeat us. They can take physical belongings from us, and they might even kill this physical body. But that different spirit that's in us, it doesn't die. We don't die because God is so great in protecting us. This nation was a spirit that's willing to overlook the odds, and something that he was willing to find the pleasing God, delight God, and don't be bitter against God. Don't let the bitterness take you away from God, and don't fear. And when you see that word fear in the Hebrew language, whenever I fear something, I give it authority. That's why Jesus in Revelation 2:10 and the other places in the Bible, do not fear. Do not fear man, but fear God. Right? Don't let man be your authority, because all he can do is kill the body. Fear God, give him authority, because not only can he allow your body to be killed, but he could allow your soul to go to that place we don't want to go. So that fear is giving that idea. So we, as Christians, we're baptized into Christ. God pours His Spirit in, and it's supposed to make us different people. Totally different. Kmart, new, right? Where you at, Charlie, so you could laugh at me? He's probably laughing at home watching. Kmart, it's a brand new person that God is creating in us. And I want to go to John chapter 12 real quick and look at this, of what's happening. John chapter 12, Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus has raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there, and Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table. Then Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume and pure nard, anointed the feet of Jesus, wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, who was intending to betray him, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor people? Now he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief. And as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. And Jesus said, let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For you always have the poor with you, but you don't always have me. Now, I want to break this down. See, what is a servant's attitude? What is the servant's spirit? Well, Mary gave a costly gift. Judas, of a natural spirit, gave a cheap sarcasm. Mary served Jesus with this different spirit. Judas criticized. Mary showed spiritual discernment. She understood what Jesus was teaching her. She got it that this man was going to die. She was preparing him for death. Jesus lacked tact and discernment. His spirit wasn't moved. His spirit wasn't changed. And here's the kicker. Mary's remembered for her love. Judas for his disloyalty. You see why God wants to create in us a different spirit? In fact, 2 Timothy 1:7 says, you don't have a spirit of timidity, but of power, love, and discipline. A new spirit that God is pouring out in us to change who we are inside. You know, there's more confusion on the subject of spirituality than probably any other subject that we deal with. Because spirituality is not made known through miracles or unusual events, but it's made known by everyday common people being led by God. That's spirituality. It doesn't mean I have to go do miracles or you know, speak in tongues or whatever. It just means that I'm a common person that allows myself to be led by God. That's spirituality. Back in the early 80s, Citibank offered loans based on character alone. The loan officer determined eligibility based on the knowledge of their character. If the officer determined that the person coming in for the loan had the character to pay it back, well, the loan was granted to him. And statistics show out of the $10 million lent to character through these character loans, $30,000 was not paid back. That's 0.3%. Now, I said back in the 80s, things might change by now, but remarkably, that's a good rate return, right? Based upon the idea of character. And why did I say that? Because God has lent us a life based upon our character. Not by what we do, but because of who we want to be and our acceptance of who God can make us by pouring that Spirit into us. A servant is somebody who is of a different spirit, different character, different nature, if you will. Those words all fit. Going back over to Numbers 14, and we're continuing in verse 24. Has a different spirit and has followed me fully. Now again, we could read Numbers 14 and we could see what was going on. Numbers 13. I mean, it's a whole bunch of rebellion against God, not believing in His promises, not trusting in His power, not letting His love change who they were, but fighting against God. Caleb decided in his mind he's going to stick to it. He made a decision to follow God, and he wasn't going to turn away from it. He stuck to it, not kind of follow God. Kind of want to follow God today. I'm not real busy. I think I'll follow Him. No. He followed Him all the time. The original language shows that this changed in spirit, changed everything about him. He wasn't the same Caleb anymore. The idea of one coming after another also refers to the idea of hope. You know, he followed me fully. He came after where the Spirit led. Okay? And it also gives the idea of hope. Following, why did he follow? What made him change? Because he knew that God was going to lead him to success. There's a lot of people, as we see, that don't believe that coming to worship God will lead them to success. Maybe they're finding success somewhere else. Maybe they're building their house upon sand because Satan's crafty. We believe that God is the one that's going to lead us to success. So we're going to follow him. We're going to fully follow him, like Caleb. So what does that mean? What is the strategy that we have? Caleb's was to follow him fully. And folks, this does require strategy. This requires planning. This requires praying. This requires patience of fully following Jesus. Now you look at it. There's many things that we talk about. Leadership strategy is different. When we follow Christ, our whole idea of leadership takes a whole different perspective. Turn over to Mark. And let's go to chapter 10. And Steve teaching this book, and I think he's already past chapter 10, so you probably learned a lot more than what I can teach you tonight. But in verses 42 and 43, calling them to himself, Jesus said to them, you know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentile, they lord it over them. In other words, they boss them around, they push them around, they make them do what they want them to do. And their great men exercise authority over them. They fear them. They're scared to death of them. That's authority. Oh, whatever you say, right? But it's not that way among you. Uh-oh, their strategy, bloop, gone, flush the mind, right? That's gone. New idea of what leadership is. But whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your what? Servant. Because he's given a new spirit. And whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. You notice the two differences? Servant. A servant is somebody who obeys the commands. A slave is someone who surrenders his will for the will of another. It's a growing process. It's progress that's taken place. Gospel strategy. Over in Galatians chapter 1, if we look at verses 6 through 9, I'm amazed that you're so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel. Jews were called to a different lifestyle through the gospel, not through the law. They took this on, but now they're coming and being persuaded to leave that idea and go back to the law. And he says, for a different gospel. which is really not another, only there are those who are disturbing you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should come to you, preach to you a different gospel than what we preach you, he's to be accursed. Strategy change. He's not to be fellowshipped. He's not to be embraced. He's not to be made part of the family. He is to be accursed. Why? Because he's a false teacher. He is not trying to lead you to God. He's trying to lead you, and again, maybe his own misunderstanding. Maybe he thinks he's doing good. But if it's a different gospel, then he is to be accursed. Our gospel strategy changes. Our lifestyle strategy, it's different. Remember in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17? The Bible says, so this I say, and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer as the Gentiles also walk. Walk as a lifestyle. We don't walk like people outside of Christ. We don't have a life like that. I've made a different strategy. I've come up with something different. Who also walk in the futility of their mind, the emptiness in their mind, and even friendship strategy. What did James say? Friendship with the world is hostility toward God. Now, he's not saying to hate the world and do all that. What he's saying is, when I embrace their way of life, when I embrace their government, when I embrace their ways of their life is governed, then I become hostile toward God. So I have to change my strategy of who I consider my friend. Has anybody in the world laid down their life for you? Then their strategy is different than God's. God came to this earth and laid down his life so that we could build our life upon that strategy, upon that way of life. And we like the idea of being free, don't we? Freed from the world, freed from the demise of where they're headed. Molly Ivins, who's a news columnist, said, many times freedom has been rolled back, and always for the same sorry reason, fear. Freedom is rolled back because people fear. Caleb's strategy was don't fear, follow. Follow fully. Make that decision. We made that decision the day we were baptized into Christ. We said we're going to follow him fully. Don't let Satan pull you off. Don't let fear stop you. Don't let anything stop you from fully following Christ, because you are a servant. You're a different person. And what's great about it is people that aren't servants of God don't find his success. That's why it pleases me so much when our young people stay faithful. I'm so proud of our young people. In this world today, it's hard for us as adults to stay faithful. Imagine how hard it is for our kids. But look at the beauty of this. Go back to that Numbers 14. Look how it ends. At the end of that verse. I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants. Are you hearing that? In other words, the kingdom's pews is going to be filled with generations, the descendants. Do you see that? I hope we do. Our kids need to see a servant in us, just like Caleb. Success is found in submission to God. There's no doubt about that. Because his promises, not his love, but his promises are conditional on our acceptance. Are we willing to do what God asks us to do? Are we willing to go? The fruit of the Spirit, right? He promises that. And we look at fruit. What is fruit? It's the lifestyle that is produced from the seed, God, planted in us. It's the fruit of the Spirit. That's promised if we accept it. And the day we were baptized, we accepted that fruit. We want that fruit. We want that decoration in our life. Crown of life. Well, we all get the crown of life. Do we? Revelation 2:10, very clear. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. And we talk about it a million times today, 1,000,001. How difficult that was for these people. You know? Chris, these men weren't allowed to go to work, and they were watching their family starve to death because of one reason. They believed in Christ. And all they had to do to feed Andrea, to feed her, all you had to do, Chris, was say, I don't believe in Jesus. Well, man, she's going to eat like a king today. And that's all you have to do. Jesus said, don't do it. Don't let fear, don't let them be your authority. Be faithful until death and receive that crown of life. He promises that crown. He promises approval if we'll endure. Blessed is the man who endures through these trials. Folks, this life isn't easy, but we have a great hope. We talked about that today, that God is going to see us through. He's going to grant us this success. Joshua 14, verse 13. What happens there? Joshua gives Caleb his portion of the land. Isn't that beautiful? Give me this mountain, Caleb cried out. Joshua gave him his land. Success. Success in God's eyes. But that success is ours. Not because of who we are, but because of the spirit that God has put in us. The difference that he makes in our lives. And the difference that he makes in our lives is he creates in us a new creature. And it's a servant, not one that wants to be served. We give our lives for the one who gave his for us. And that's what a servant does. If we're letting God work in us, what he's doing, folks, is creating a servant in us. He'll give us that structure. He'll build us up just like a servant. Someone who will not let the fears of the world, the phoniness of the world, pull them away from serving God. He'll give us a servant's spirit. That's the strength we have inside. And folks, he'll give us the right strategy, and he promises success. Don't turn to the right or to the left, and you'll have success wherever you go. God's promise to Joshua is our promise today. You know, I don't know where you are in your life as far as following Jesus, but it starts at baptism. Because that's when we submit ourselves to the will of God and ask for him, cry out to him for a clean conscience. Today, if you're here and you want to study about that, we would love to open this book with you, get in the Bible together, study, learn, grow, and hopefully you'll be baptized, wash away those sins, start following Christ. There are people here today like me that have obeyed the gospel. And I don't want us to lose that power of being a servant. Because the world isn't going to tell you that's powerful. They're going to tell you that's foolish. But we are of a different spirit. If there's something going on in your life that Satan's trying to use to get you to doubt the power of being a servant, today's the day that we should lay it at Jesus' feet. Today's the day that we should go to God and say, help me out. I want to be made a servant. Do what you must do to make me like you. Today we'll do that for you, lead you to the waters of baptism, say a prayer with you, encourage you, strengthen you, if you'll let us. Take this opportunity now to come forward as we stand and sing.